So maybe let's go into the topic itself about team topologies. So in the first place, when you wrote this book, what exactly the core message or principle or even the problems that you were foreseeing during that time that led you into writing this book?
We did a lot of consulting around DevOps and continuous delivery. Many clients wanted help with some new tool set, adopting some better practices. And that's all good and well, and it helps to some extent. But in many organizations, they're not looking at the elephant in the room, where teams are not communicating in an effective way. Teams don't even know sometimes who they have to ask for certain things. You have that, what I mentioned, very strict separation of concerns and responsibilities, which means you introduce a lot of dependencies to get any sort of value to customers out the door. It means it has to go through many teams doing small things. And so that's not conducive to fast flow. You can have the best tool set in the market, and that's only going to help you to some extent. When you have the combination of the flow of work in the teams, it flows well because the team has sufficient autonomy and they understand their dependencies. We avoid that sort of blocking dependencies where one team has to wait for another team to do something. Once we achieve that sort of faster flow with more autonomy, then yes, the tools can then hyphen even more this sort of fast flow, get better data, get better automation, etc. But if we just start with automation and tooling, we quickly run against challenges in terms of team structures and communication. So that's what we were seeing recurrently with clients. We thought at some point we had seen enough patterns that work and patterns that didn't work. Also, a lot of learning from the DevOps Enterprise Summit, this conference that happens every year, from the publishers of the book as well, IT Revolution. So a lot of stories that were being shared by different organizations on some of the patterns that work and didn't work. So we sort of brought all that together into the book.
So I think what I hear you say is that, yeah, a lot of teams these days, they will definitely start with tools and technologies, probably, right? Thinking about how to implement those, but actually without looking necessarily to what the team structure or even the org structure at that point in time within the company. You mentioned interestingly in the book, actually, the first problem is with the org charts itself. Why do you think typically org chart is maybe the first problem where all this maybe barrier to fast flow, maybe barrier into dependencies, blockage, and things like that? So maybe you can explain a little bit around that.
Sure. So let me say the org chart is not a problem per se. It's not that we shouldn't have org charts. They have important benefits in terms of understanding how we're organized, especially in large organizations. It helps with reporting and hopefully also helps with kind of top-down alignment of strategic goals for the organization. So everyone understands how are we related and how does our work relate to the goals that the organization is trying to achieve. So that's all fine. The problem that tends to happen is when, in a way, we give too much importance to the org chart in the sense that people start looking at it as specifying all the decision-making lines and specifying with whom should we interact or not. If this team is in another department, then we shouldn't talk to them directly. We need to go up the hierarchy and then down the hierarchy to get to the team. Those sort of things is where it starts to become a challenge to fast flow. Because with the complexity of modern software delivery and operations, you can do that, but you won't achieve fast flow because there's too many steps and too much redirection in a way through the hierarchy to get to the actual work getting done. So we want to favor for fast flow, you want to favor local decisions and having teams interact with the right teams at the right time. And so when you introduce those sort of blockers with the hierarchy and decision making having to be top down, then we're not allowing the people who are doing the work and closer to the customer to actually make the best decisions. That's where really the org chart can become a problem, where people see it as imposing the communication lines and imposing decision-making lines between teams. That's the key issue there, where it becomes an obstacle to fast flow if we misinterpret the org chart as dictating all these things. Unfortunately, in many organizations, that tends to happen. It also is coupled with the problem that in some organizations, the worth of the managers, senior managers, is linked to how many people report to them. And that kind of feeds into this narrative that you need to go up the hierarchy for any kind of decision making so that we can prove that the value of the senior managers. Hopefully with team topologies, this sort of approach is being replaced or move away from that to more how do we enable the people and the teams who are under our hierarchy to actually be able to make better decisions more autonomously and not depend on the hierarchy.